Moscow under attack, Ukraine sends historic drones swarm to Russian capital. Something absolutely massive just happened, right now. And if you haven't been paying attention to what's unfolding between Russia and Ukraine, you need to start, because what happened overnight is unlike anything we've seen in this entire war. Ukraine launched one of its largest drone attacks on Moscow, with Russian air defense forces shooting down multiple unmanned aerial vehicles approaching the capital. We're not talking about 5 drones. We're not talking about 10. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin reported at least 16 drones shot down over the Russian capital, and that number kept climbing throughout the day. Think about that for a moment. 16 drones heading straight for Moscow, the heart of Russia, Putin's city, the capital that was supposed to be untouchable, the place where Russian citizens were promised they'd never have to worry about the war coming to their doorstep. Well, it came, and it came hard. Explosions were reported in the suburbs of Moscow, according to Russian Telegram news channels. Picture this, you're a Moscow resident. You wake up to the sound of air raid sirens. You look out your window and see drone debris falling from the sky. Emergency crews rushing everywhere. And you realize the war that seemed so distant, so far away in Ukraine, is literally overhead. But here's where this story gets even more intense. This wasn't just about Moscow. Russian air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 20 Ukrainian drones overnight across multiple regions, including Bryansk, Kaluga, Belgorod, and the Moscow region. 20 drones across multiple regions. This is a coordinated, large-scale operation. And then the morning came. Moscow Mayor Sobyanin reported the downings in back-to-back Telegram posts, updating as more drones were allegedly shot down. First one, then a second at 8:16 Moscow time, a third at 8:27, and a fourth at 8:49. He's literally live updating the attack as it's happening. That's how intense this situation is. Now let's talk about what this actually means, because this isn't just another drone strike. This is Ukraine sending a very clear message to Moscow. And that message is simple. Nowhere is safe, not even your capital city, not even the place where Putin sits and makes his decisions about this war. Flights restrictions were imposed at Moscow's major airports, Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo. Think about the chaos. International flights grounded, passengers stranded, the entire aviation system of Russia's largest city disrupted because Ukrainian drones are in the airspace. That's not just a military operation, that's psychological warfare. That's showing every Russian citizen that their government cannot protect them. But wait, there's more, and this is where the timing becomes absolutely critical. All of this is happening while peace talks are supposedly ongoing, while Trump's team is negotiating, while everyone is talking about ending this war. And yet, Ukraine and Russia traded heavy cross-border drone attacks overnight into Wednesday, with Moscow reporting it downed at least 38 Ukrainian drones. So let me ask you a question. What does it tell you when both sides are launching massive drone attacks on each other, while simultaneously sitting at the negotiation table? What does it tell you about how serious these peace talks really are? Kyiv says Russia launched at least 80 drones overnight, 50 of which were shot down or suppressed, while 29 struck 7 locations in Ukraine. So this isn't one-sided. Russia is hitting back hard. Both sides are escalating. Both sides are showing they're not backing down. And both sides are doing this while pretending they want peace. Now here's something you need to understand about these Ukrainian drone attacks on Moscow. This is not the first time. This has been happening repeatedly in recent weeks. Previous drone attacks targeting Moscow occurred on December 4, November 28, and November 24. Ukraine is consistently targeting the Russian capital. They're making sure Moscow feels this war. And Russia knows it. Moscow Mayor Sobyanin boasted last week that Moscow had better defenses against drone attacks than the most advanced countries. He's bragging about air defenses while drones are literally hitting his city. That tells you everything about the propaganda versus reality situation in Russia right now. But let's dig deeper into what's actually happening on the ground, because this story isn't just about numbers and statistics, it's about real impact. Emergency crews were working to clear debris at crash sites, though no casualties or damage were reported at the time of publication. That's the official line, but think about what it means when drone debris is falling across a city of millions. Think about the terror, the uncertainty, the fear. Now, why is Ukraine doing this? What's the strategic thinking behind these attacks? It's simple. Ukraine is showing that they can reach anywhere in Russia. They're demonstrating their long-range strike capability. They're proving that despite everything Russia throws at them, despite the massive military might of the Russian Federation, Ukraine can still hit back where it hurts most. Kyiv regularly uses long-range drones to target military and industrial targets in Russia, including oil refineries, weapons factories, and ammunition depots. This is part of a broader strategy. Disrupt Russian logistics, hit their economy, make the Russian people feel the cost of this war. Because if Russian citizens in Moscow are watching drones get shot down over their city, they're going to start asking questions about why this war is still happening. And that brings us to the bigger picture, the context, the timing, because remember, this escalation comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky prepares to send a revised peace proposal to the U.S. negotiating team. He's preparing a peace proposal while launching drones at Moscow. That's not a contradiction. That's negotiating from a position of strength. The Ukrainian negotiating team is finalizing work on 20 points of a fundamental document that could define the parameters for ending the war, Zelensky said. 20 points. That's a comprehensive peace plan. But Ukraine isn't coming to the table weak. They're coming to the table while demonstrating they can strike Moscow itself. And here's what makes this even more complex. The plan remains stalled over major issues, including the status of partially occupied eastern regions and long-term security guarantees to prevent renewed Russian aggression. So even with all these negotiations, even with all this diplomatic activity, the fundamental issues remain unresolved. Think about it from Ukraine's perspective. They're being asked to negotiate about their own territory. They're being pressured to make concessions. They're being told to be realistic. And their response, launch drones at Moscow, show Russia that Ukraine isn't defeated, show Russia that this war has costs for both sides. But Russia isn't sitting still either, far from it. Russia launched at least 80 drones into Ukraine overnight, a massive coordinated attack across multiple regions. Both sides are locked in this deadly dance. Both sides are escalating while talking about peace. Both sides are trying to gain leverage for negotiations by demonstrating military capability. Now let's talk about the civilian impact, because that's what really matters here. Real people, real lives, real fear. When drones are being shot down over Moscow, when explosions are happening in suburbs, when airports are being shut down, ordinary Russians are experiencing the war in ways they never have before. For most of this conflict, the average Moscow resident has been insulated from the fighting. Sure, they've seen it on TV, sure, they've heard about it, but it's been happening far away, in Ukraine, at the border, not in their city, not in their airspace. But that's changing, and that change is significant. Moscow and its surrounding regions have been occasionally targeted by Ukrainian drone attacks since Russia began its full-scale invasion of the country in 2022. This has been building, this has been escalating, and now we're seeing some of the largest attacks yet. What does this mean for the future? What does this mean for peace prospects? Honestly, it's complicated. On one hand, these attacks could push Russia toward negotiations. If the Russian people start demanding an end to a war that's bringing drones to their capital, that creates domestic pressure on Putin. And Putin, despite his authoritarian control, still has to manage public opinion to some degree. On the other hand, these attacks could harden Russian resolve. They could be used for propaganda purposes. Putin could point to these drone strikes and say, see, this is why we need to fight. This is why we need to win. Ukraine is attacking our capital. It could rally Russians around the flag rather than turning them against the war. And there's another factor to consider, the international dimension. How does the world react when Ukraine is launching major drone attacks on Moscow while peace talks are happening? Some countries might see it as Ukraine defending itself and demonstrating strength. Others might see it as Ukraine escalating and undermining peace efforts. The United States is in a particularly tricky position here. Trump's team is trying to broker a peace deal. They're pushing both sides to negotiate. But if Ukraine keeps hitting Moscow with drones while these talks are happening, does that make America look weak? Does that make it look like they can't control their ally? And from Russia's perspective, they're launching their own massive attacks. They're not innocent victims here. They're actively bombing Ukrainian cities, hitting civilian infrastructure, trying to freeze Ukraine into submission by destroying the power grid. So both sides have blood on their hands. Both sides are escalating. Here's what's really fascinating about all this. The technology, the capability. Ukraine has built an entire drone industry during this war. Kyiv regularly uses long-range drones to target locations deep inside Russia. These aren't simple hobby drones. These are sophisticated, long-range strike weapons. Ukraine has developed the technology, the production capacity, and the operational capability to hit targets hundreds of kilometers inside Russian territory. That's incredible when you think about it. Ukraine, a country that's been at war for nearly 4 years, a country that's been fighting for its survival, has managed to build an indigenous drone industry that can threaten Moscow itself. That's not just impressive from a military standpoint, that's transformative. And Russia knows it. That's why they're investing so heavily in air defenses. That's why Moscow's mayor is constantly updating about interceptions, because they're genuinely worried. If Ukrainian drones can reach Moscow, they can reach anywhere. No Russian city is safe. No Russian military installation is beyond reach. But here's the thing about air defense. It's never perfect. You can shoot down 16 drones, but what if 17 are launched? You can intercept most attacks, but you can't stop everything. And every drone that gets through, every piece of debris that falls, every explosion that happens, it undermines the narrative that Russia is winning this war. So where do we go from here? What happens next? Based on what we're seeing today, December 10th, 2025, here are the possibilities. First possibility, escalation continues. Both sides keep launching drones at each other. Both sides keep trying to gain military advantage. The peace talks stall or collapse completely because neither side is willing to compromise from a position of perceived weakness. Second possibility, these attacks are actually part of the negotiation strategy. Both sides are demonstrating capability before agreeing to terms. It's like a final show of force before signing a ceasefire. Ukraine shows it can hit Moscow. Russia shows it can devastate Ukraine. And then both sides agree that continued fighting benefits no one. Third possibility, something breaks. Either Russia's air defenses fail catastrophically and Ukrainian drones start hitting major targets in Moscow, causing a crisis, or Ukraine's defenses are overwhelmed and Russia causes massive civilian casualties, forcing international intervention. Some external shock forces both sides to the table seriously. Right now, we're in a very dangerous phase. Both sides are escalating, both sides are attacking, both sides are talking about peace while preparing for war. This could go either way. It could lead to a breakthrough, or it could lead to disaster. What we know for certain is this: the war has come to Moscow. Ukrainian drones are in Russian airspace. Russian citizens are watching their air defenses work overtime to protect their capital, and that changes the dynamic of this entire conflict. For too long, this has been a war where Ukraine suffered and Russia felt relatively safe, where Ukrainian cities were destroyed while Moscow went about its business, where Ukrainian children learned to sleep in bomb shelters while Russian children slept peacefully. But that imbalance is shifting, slowly, gradually, but it's shifting. And that shift matters because wars end when both sides feel the cost, when both sides understand that continued fighting brings nothing but destruction, when both sides realize that peace, however imperfect, is better than endless war. Are we at that point yet? I don't know. Based on today's attacks, based on the continued escalation, based on the stalled peace talks, I'd say we're not there yet, but we might be getting closer. The next few days and weeks are crucial. Watch what happens with these peace negotiations. Watch whether the drone attacks continue or intensify. Watch how Russia responds. Watch how Ukraine positions itself, because this story is far from over. Ukraine launched a major drone attack on Moscow. Russian air defenses intercepted most or all of them, but the message was sent. The capability was demonstrated, and Moscow knows that nowhere is truly safe anymore. This is the new reality of this war. Long-range strikes, drone warfare, both sides hitting each other's heartlands. And somewhere in the middle of all this violence and escalation, people are trying to negotiate peace. Will it work? Can it work? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: the war that started in Ukraine has now reached Moscow, and that changes everything. Stay informed, stay alert, because this conflict is entering a new and potentially decisive phase. And what happens next could determine not just the future of Ukraine and Russia, but the future of European security for decades to come.